Welcome to the Always Right podcast. I am your co-host, Jamie Vendera, and this is
Carissa DeLay.
And welcome back. Today we're going to talk about, in this episode, writing nonfiction books.
Yes.
So I think I'll let Carissa start.
Okay. All right. So first, I just want to talk about when you're writing nonfiction, there are different types of nonfiction. There are like essentially 5-ish types of nonfiction. We've got like the active type, the browsable type, the traditional. You got like literature, like that is exposing something. You've got narrative nonfiction. You've got creative. What's going on? There's creative nonfiction. So nonfiction in itself is just you're not. I mean, sometimes even some stuff you see that's supposed to be nonfiction, you're like, this is totally made up.
It could be true crime. It could be a historical book. It could be a book studying ghosts. It could be how to play the flute. There's just so much in nonfiction.
It's good that you did with the ghosts, like paranormal, because some people would take that as false, not facts, but it's based on creative nonfiction experience. Like what you're telling a story based on what your
what you've done, your past experiences.
And it's not an autobiography, or like in that sense. I mean, that's considered nonfiction, but in a sense, you're talking about a subject matter that is, to you is real. You know what I mean? So I mean,
I've seen
some people don't believe in evolution, so that could be considered fabricated. So it's not. It doesn't mean whether it's factual proof, unless it is an academic, scholarly nonfiction type thing. There's a difference.
Yeah, so this is based on your memories, your experience. I saw a book that popped out. A guy was a big Mythbusters fan, and I don't know if he won something, but he got to spend the day with Jamie and Adams. So the next thing you know, he's writing a book, Mythbuster for a Day, which I thought was kind of cool. And it was nonfiction. It was based on his experience. And again, like you said, it could be, I've seen ghosts, whether you believe them or not. So I could write a story and you could say that's fiction. Right. Not necessarily, because I'm not making up a story. This literally happened to me in my life. But,
well, that's kind of like even with music writing. You have some musicians that write from their experiences and tell stories with music, but then some that literally just like they're writing music for a movie. So they're essentially doing fictional writing they're just creating a song for the fictional episode or fictional thing that they're writing for. But it's the same with any type of writing. Like when I write nonfiction college papers, I have to keep a certain type of language. I can't use any pejorative words. I can't use anything that is non-objective. So I can't write this from a perspective like, oh, this is what I believe. When you're writing a college paper and it's nonfiction, it can't be creative. It has to be straightforward, objective. This is what the research says. This is what I'm taking from this, only based on the research as an opinion.
Because I'm assuming you're citing your references too.
You have to.
Yeah, that's much more extensive nonfiction.
Yes. In fiction, especially, it's different if it's your personal story. But with the nonfiction book that I've only written one nonfiction book, and I had to cite.
You had to dig deep.
Yeah, I had to dig deep, but I also had to cite the fact that I had several archaeologists I worked with and give them credit in the back. Like, these are the people that I worked with. The guy who was the torsion energy expert from Serbia, that when they allow me to quote them, I put their name in the back. Like, these are the people who are letting me quote them. And honestly, that was kind of a learning curve, and I will get better as I do that, because citing people and using references is kind of hard to do, and doing it the right way. And I learned more about that when I was writing college papers versus when I wrote my first nonfiction book. I could have done better. Let's put it that way.
But this is the path in life. Every book you go, as long as you stay passionate, it gets better because you're learning. Of course, I say that, and you could read an author, you're like, oh man, this latest book by him sucked or her sucked. So you never know. But with that said, in respect, you do learn. There are things you pick up every time you write a book. And
it's hard in fiction writing, it's hard to cross genres, but in nonfiction, it's hard to go from fiction to nonfiction or nonfiction to fiction, in my personal experience, because for nonfiction, you have to be very clear what you're telling. Don't lead the reader several chapters along. Like if you're discussing a topic, discuss the topic in full and then move on. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to let them lead. I'm going to lead them on a little bit here.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no leading on. Like we're not leading the readers on in nonfiction. We're telling them what's going on. We're being very upfront. Provide pictures if necessary. You're building. You're building with nonfiction versus stringing along.
It's so funny you said that because my brain's going off. You'll be on Facebook, you'll see these ads like, lose 10 pounds in 5 days. For only $19.99, you can buy this ebook. And then you pick it up and they string you along and they give you like one little idea. But if you buy the $99 program, then we give you all of our secrets. So, yes, that's a type of writing. And I know we're always right, but we're speaking to a nonfiction author who wants to complete a book, not a string along product. If you do, that's your thing. But this is how we're approaching this.
Yeah, and so like when you go to the bookstore and you're looking for something nonfiction, you're like, oh, I just want to learn. Like ironically, I prefer to read. Growing up, I would read more nonfiction. I would watch more documentary type things. I was always more based on like building the facts in my brain and building that foundation than I wanted to put fake stories in there. But now I'm a more fictional author. Aside from my college stuff that I have to do research for, I write more fictionally than I do nonfiction.
Yeah, I think
I prefer to read nonfiction.
Like reading growing up, I was kind of equal. It's what am I interested in? I love fantasy, which is why I consume Terry Brooks books. But I love reading about pyramids and pendulums and singing and things like that. So I would consume every book I could find on either a fiction author or a nonfiction subject that I loved. Yep. So that's, I got to have that interest. And it's the same thing with writing for me. I think I'm at this point, I'm about equal with writing both nonfiction and fiction.
Yes. Well, but so you have a lot to take because you have a vocal academy that you can pull. Like these are some of the things I'm teaching. Like you have a foundational thing that you have created that you can write about. Even with Dr. Vox, you have a product that not only you can just show the product, but you can write about it. Like this is what we're doing. And you're the image is right behind you with that one, but you have a whole system with that. Like it's almost like an expounded instructional page, like it's explaining things more, so you have to think the reader doesn't know what's in your head. So if you're trying to explain to them what it is you're telling about, pretend they know nothing. Like you can't be like, oh, everybody understands carbon-14 dating. No, they don't. So you have to almost draw pictures out. You have to like explain this, or people may not even understand what an EVP is in ghost hunting. Like if we're talking about ghost hunting stories, if you're sharing your if you keep talking about EVP and you don't explain to the reader what an EVP is, they're like, I don't know what that is.
I could have sworn when you're writing your last book, I was one of those people like, I need more about carbon dating. You're not telling me enough.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because I use that example because I put it out there with the assumption that for the majority of the people that are going to be reading my book, they probably understand what this means. And I'm thinking, when I'm writing it, I don't have to put all the filler. But then I did have to put the filler. I ended up drawing a picture to explain carbon-14 and I'm not saying this is people are dummies, but like my husband, he's like, I'm hoping you write this to where I understand it, because he's like, your brain and my brain are different. My husband's extremely smart. And he doesn't give himself credit for that, but I'm smart on a different side. Like he's medical, he's an officer at an Air Force base and running a part of the medical department there. And for me, I'm on more of the paranormal, like carbon dating, like quantum physics. Like if we're watching a show with time travel, he's like, what timeline are we in? And I'm like, oh, you don't know? Like, let me tell you. Because my brain follows that, his doesn't. But I also know where we are on the map, where he's like, I don't know where you are unless I have GPS. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. I have like tons of mapping in this book, like tons of images. Because especially like when I'm describing torsion energy to people, I can use words, but unless you see what I'm actually talking about, you're like, oh, I get it. I get it. Like when I'm using like the little the globe, so you can understand where if torsion energy is here, it's also going to be, if it's pulling from this here, it's also pulling on this side, and then it's also pulling. Do I have it on this page? Next page. Like it's pulling from the other side.
The other side of what?
The Earth.
Earth, correct. So, because it's blurry over here to me, but I forget that. Oh. That's just
yeah.
on my
Once
end.
we put this, once we put this out there, yeah. If you want to see the pictures I'm talking about, you'll have to go to our YouTube channel. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're doing nonfiction, ask yourself, if I know nothing, am I explaining this to the point where, like, you're talking to someone that doesn't know what you're talking about? Are you giving them enough information that they're going to be able to follow you if you keep building on it? Give them the back. It's almost like you're giving a backstory of a character, except for you're giving a backstory of your topic.
Yeah, I always think of it like, because I've done a lot of workshops around the world. If I had to go teach how to sing a high note, how would I have bullet points that I may do on a screen, and I break it down like, okay, I'm Jamie Vendera. Let's talk about breathing. Let's talk about breath support. Let's talk about placement. Let's talk about exercises. So I have a very analytical order when I'm writing a nonfiction book, so I make sure that I cover all things. And it's like you said, with torsion energy, you're so used to working with it, sometimes you forget. Sometimes I forget that a lot of people don't know how to breathe. So many people go and raise their shoulders up, and they forget when we're babies, we naturally, instinctively know how to breathe, where our diaphragm drops and our bellies pop out, but we forget. And there'll be times I'm like, breathe. I don't know how to breathe, Jamie. You tell me to breathe right. I was like, oh, yeah, I should know this. I've been teaching this 27 years. Let me back up and explain it. Not that I'm dumbing it down. It doesn't mean that you're not intelligent, but hey, it's easy when we're in it, and we've worked with something in nonfiction so much, we tend to sometimes forget. This is for everybody, that the average person may not understand torsion energy. So yeah, I'm Sean Connery. Yes, I'm Dr. Evil. So
it's funny.
So everybody out there, you're good at something. It could be coach. Go ahead.
Well, that's kind of like whenever I owned the salon in Ohio, and I had like new employees, I would tell them, listen, I know you just got out of beauty school. I don't know what you've retained. So I'm going to tell you things. And I'm not telling you this because I feel like you're stupid. I'm telling you this because I don't know what you already know. So I'm going to tell you like essentially the same things and see what's sticking, what's not sticking. So don't take it as if I'm telling you this, I feel like you're stupid. I'm telling you this because I want to make sure we're on the same page and you understand before we go further.
Well, that's practical application. I took electronics in high school, but if I had to go get a job as an electromechanical engineer at the time, or even if I had to join a TV repair shop, I couldn't have done it. It was a lot of book work, and it's until you actually do it and put it into application, you don't really have a full understanding of how the process goes. Yes, you can retain a lot of knowledge, but doing it makes a huge difference. So my point was, everybody, there's something you're good at. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to write a nonfiction book, what are you good at? I mean, it doesn't have to be torsion energy or singing. It could be that you were a volleyball coach back in high school and you created some drills that really helped the team.
Or that's a great topic, because sometimes even like a coaching system, my experience with coaching and how I got my team to listen, would be beneficial to some people, coach wise. They maybe have all this knowledge in their head, be like, how do I betray this to my team? That might be a really good topic for someone. Or like even some of the nonfiction people that we have that write based on like medical understanding of the vocal cords. What should we be using? Or sometimes when it comes to nonfiction, you see this on TikTok. How many times have you watched TikTok and you're like, okay, how long have I been living and didn't know this? You know what I mean? There are topics out there that you think people understand, but they don't.
I cannot tell you how many times I've said, I was today years old when I realized, I can't think of anything on top of my head, but I've seen videos like that. I'm like, how did I not know this? I've been doing this my whole life, and you can do this. And I wish I could think of something off the top of my head, but it's, yes, We take everything for granted. So, don't look at that. You may know something, you're really good at something. Maybe you're training dogs, or maybe you're really into those murder mystery shows that are real. And you're like, ooh, I got a theory, and you follow up on it, and you really start researching, like, oh, I know this death. I think I see a connection that nobody else is making.
But key thing here, if you decide to do something like that, make sure it's okay with living family members. That's the thing with nonfiction. Nonfiction is different than when you're doing fiction, because when you're doing nonfictions, you're making statements versus, I'm trying to think. You're not at liberty to make statements about someone else unless you have their permission. So sometimes it's good to reach out to a family. Hey, I'm going to write this book. Like, I'm going to be writing a book about my aunt's murder. And so I've already been talking to my aunt. I got the oldest daughter's permission. I feel like that's all I need. She's kind of like the head. She's got, like power of attorney. So I'm thinking you can give me these stories. You've been in the family the longest. So you can give me some insight. And then I'm going to contact the prosecutor from that state and say, hey, I want to reach out to the person who did this. How am I allowed to correspond? How can I do this? What's the best? Don't assume just because you're writing it, you have freedom. It's not the same freedom of speech as you are speaking. When you write it down and you're becoming the authority on it, make sure if you're using someone else's words or whatever, that you have the right to do it.
Yeah, you don't want to be sued for defamation of character or anything, because you were researching, and yes, you may think it's factual, but if you're not part of that scenario,
But even if you're researching it, make sure you're researching and using an actual source that isn't an opinion. You can go on Google Scholar, and there are articles on there that have been vetted, essentially have been peer reviewed. You can use things that have been like fact checked. You can find those documentations, but you have to cite it. You have to cite it in text. You can there's different versions of citing. You can use a little number, and that number will correspond to something at the end. But always put in the back of the book where you got your information. What did you use? Did you use the Webster's Dictionary? Did you use Wikipedia? What are you using for your facts? So when people are like, oh yeah, they use this, I'm probably not going to believe this. You know what I mean? So they can your comments, your statements have more weight to them when you use citations. And there's great stuff online how to cite, but be consistent. Don't use like the APA for one, and then use the Chicago 17th version, another way. You have to be very consistent. Keep how you're citing consistent through the whole book, and how you cite it at the end. There is not the
and thoroughly study it. I won't say who it is, but there was a guy who made a fitness product, which I actually like. But he's citing some papers saying this is why mine's superior, and everything you knew about diet and cardio, you're all dumb. This is his attitude. But people come back and said, wait a minute, you're citing things that have already been debunked, that were considered factual 20 or 30 years ago. Here's the latest references. But he's picking and choosing. Don't pick and choose to take care of your own agenda. Really study everything to make sure that you're like, yep, okay, it hasn't changed, then I can cite this.
I actually had this experience in the spring with a college class that I was taking. The professor he was an awesome professor, very responsive, like always. It was great to work with. He did not release the next week's work. You weren't allowed to work on it until that Sunday before, because he said, I'm going to make sure all this stuff is accurate. But the problem was, this class, I knew a lot of the material ahead of time. And so I started to question some of the validity of material, because the material wasn't being updated. I'm like, hey, this is actually updated. Like, there's a whole new research on this. Like, and I sent him, like, this research is proven that what you just posted as our most recent current event has shifted and changed. Just wanted to put that out there. He's like, well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I didn't even know that. And then towards the end of the course, I had missed some questions only because the facts had changed, but the questions on the test were the old facts. So I said, hey, I kind of sent it, and we sat down for like 20 minutes and went through a bunch of questions together. And he changed the entire test, and he gave credit to every student that missed those because, it was taught one way in this thing, but then further research that we were supposed to be doing said a different thing on the same topic.
Well, that's an honorable, professor,
Good
because
professor.
think about how many professors are staunch and like, nope, this is old school. I'm not changing. You're getting the grade you're getting.
Well, I
So,
had a professor do that. I had a professor who, in the lectures, stated one thing. In a separate video, it said another thing. And you're like, which topic is right? Because it said, this is the two people, and this is the line of events that happened in this order. But then his lecture said they happened in a different way. Well, when we tested on it, it gave both ways. I'm like, which one's right? Like he said this, the video said that. So I reached out and said, hey, your lecture said this, the video said that. Both are an option, but we can only select one on the quiz. So how are we wrong? Like which one's right or wrong? Because it's confusing. And he wouldn't change it.
hmm.
And I
Yeah,
was
it
like,
kind of reminds me of my wife is really smart in math, and she had basically flunked a course in like advanced algebra, and she's like this, but her teacher was this staunchy, an old way, boring, just some weird stuff. She's like, she just couldn't get it. So we paid for it. She redid the class with another teacher. Day one, it clicked in her mind because I mean, even in teaching, there are new methodologies with teaching math or teaching singing. So me, I'm ADHD. I'm all over the place. Why'd I even bring that up? Your story, but really, as if you're writing a nonfiction book, here's the point I'm trying to make. There's a squirrel. Is do it in a new, innovative way. If you're researching and you're reading other books on the topic that you're wanting to write about, don't just parrot and copy. Think how can I really get somebody excited about this? How can I put my voice into this nonfiction book, regardless of what the subject is? That's what's going to make you a unique author.
Yeah, and so with this one, with Before the World Was Lost, A Journey to Eden, it was kind of like a beginner's guide for people who don't know anything about the subject, and so I could kind of get the information out. I expounded on the information for the most part to explain, but I could go deeper. These are topics that can go on and on and on. So I could go deeper, but I did the basic explaining what's happening in each of these chapters and building on that. And that's another thing. We talked about editing in the last episode. Editing nonfiction is completely different because you have to have someone fact checking you. There has to be a fact checking in your editing to a certain extent. You have to find someone that's going to be like, okay, I'm going to read through this and I'm going to, this fact right here, I'm going to double check it. You need someone to do that for you, because if you're not doing it yourself, or you're not putting citations like you should, and you're just putting out an opinion, you may have a bunch of feedback that is not so great. You may have people saying, excuse me, who do you think you are?
Yep.
It's true. Didn't
and
you
I've
know
seen it
exists? Yeah. And it's almost like when you post something on Facebook and then people start saying things, you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Delete. You can't delete that book once it's out.
No, it's out there.
It's out there. When you delete a post, it's different. I mean, obviously.
Make absolutely sure you're happy and you stand by what you say. I mean, I understand things change, like you said. New research and new understanding.
Mm-hmm.
That is completely understandable.
That's different.
Yeah.
Because I mean, obviously, old research is published, and there's new research. But they say, based on this old research, we've now got better technology. We can, whatever. I just did a paper on. They used to think that they couldn't get any evidence off of bones and teeth from a cremated remains. But that's from prehistoric stuff and even areas where people were burned to the stake or whatever. They didn't think they could get any evidence off of that. But now they're finding with new technology that they can see microscopic evidence of vitamin deficiencies. So they can see whether or not, if these are children's teeth, these children maybe have not been outside much because they had a high evidence of vitamin D deficiency. So they can start recreating a new history based on what they're seeing. Like, oh, with new evidence, we can see that maybe they were lacking by maybe they didn't get enough food. Maybe these were poor children, or there's all kinds of different things they can start linking together with new technology. So don't be like surprised if like you put something out like, oh, but new technology says this.
Yep, it's always changing.
Yeah.
So find your story.
Yes.
Find what you want to write about. What are you good at? And then for me, my last tip would be, again, I plot it out like I'm doing a workshop. I put bullet points in a row to do it.
Yeah, that's good. Because what I was going to say is when you're doing nonfiction versus fiction, even though you should be organized, when you're doing nonfiction, it is definitely key to organize your order of facts. Don't throw a bunch of like all this in the beginning, kind of build on it. I personally feel like if you build on it, I'm going to be able to understand it more than if you, try to give me the deeper stuff first. But it's kind of like not all nonfiction is about writing too. Some nonfiction could be even like browsable nonfiction, like photographers could just put a book together of their images. But at the same time, you have to maybe put a descriptive paragraph in the beginning, or you may be describing your pictures underneath where you took the picture, whatever. There are different types of nonfiction. They're not all writing, obviously.
Yeah, poetry.
Yes. Yeah. Poetry is great because poetry can be nonfiction based on your personal experiences, but you're using words and imagery, about what's going on. So, yeah.
My wife keeps texting me about her new Bronco. So,
yeah.
Which I got from your car dealer.
Yes, Mark Porter Ford in Jackson.
What's up, Mark?
Well, Shane's the guy. Shane's the guy in Jackson.
Yeah.
But yeah. I'm going to drive up to Ohio and have Shane do my next deal. So,
I thought she was coming up so we could eat at Archinetti's.
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
I can't remember if that's where we went to eat.
We did go there, but it's under new ownership, so
I don't remember it being. I went with Diane, but it looks a little different.
Yeah, it doesn't. Okay. Yeah, there's all. I'll probably go to the Spot on Main because that's my favorite coffee shop there in Jackson.
Yeah, we've been there too.
Yes.
So it's just saying when you come in, you don't do it in secret. Or we're going to have a podcast about why Jamie's whining he didn't get to see Carissa and her hubby. So,
yes.
Bam.
All right. Okay, so that's what we have currently for you to inspire you with your nonfiction. Just put it out there. Make sure you edit it. Make sure that you're not leading your reader along. Make sure you're explaining things to them. And also think of what type of nonfiction you have. So try to hone in what style of nonfiction you're doing, creative, active, whether it's going to be something that you're actively engaging your people as you're going along. There's just different styles. Find your style and stick within that so you can stay on point.
Yeah, don't be afraid to read, a bunch of books on the same topic. It doesn't mean you're copying, but just so you have a better understanding, like, okay, I structurally I know what to do, but I'm going to write it in my own voice.
Well, and even when you're reading someone else's nonfiction, you're like, okay, they did a great job, but I think I'm going to express more about this particular. I want to make sure I go a little more in depth with about that. So that'll help you. Like, what has always already been talked about, and what do I need to keep adding? What's going to set mine apart? How am I going to add to this already oversaturated topic?
Yeah, because you don't want to. Nobody needs another book that's almost the exact same. I've seen that, especially in the singing world. I'm like, you just read this author's book and you basically copied it. So we have two. We got the one good book and the one you buy on Wish. Mm-hmm. So, be
funny
original.
Story. When you said that, we're going to end with this funny story. One year, because we love to dress up for Halloween, and typically my husband's a pirate, but him and his brother were wanting to recreate their childhood picture where my husband was Batman and his brother was Robin. And so I'm like, well, if you're doing Batman, I'm totally doing Catwoman. And my husband's like, so you're going to do like the leather one from like the Michael Keaton era? I'm like, yeah. So I, of course, get the leather, like the nice leather, like full bodysuit and everything. And he gets his vintage looking Batman suit, like the blue version of it. And I'm not even kidding. Someone said when you order your Batman costume off of Wish.
Ah,
And I'm like, it's so funny because I was like this I'm like, it would have been nice if he had more of the Michael Keaton black,
he's like Adam West. I love Adam West.
Oh yes, it'd been like Adam West and like, who played Catwoman? Michelle
Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer, thank you. Yeah. So yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Don't think I'm not going to bring it up to him when I see him next.
Yes. All right, so that is kind of our take on nonfiction. If you have any questions about nonfiction, you can email us at alwayswritepodcast@gmail.com. You can comment. We'll try to get back to you on any of our social media. Feel free to share your stories. Like, these are my experiences with nonfiction. These are the things I struggled with, because we will revisit these topics down the road with new information, or even like takes from the editor or takes from other authors who are nonfiction writers. So we will have those things in the future. So anyways, as we close, I am Carissa DeLay, and this is Jamie. And
Ventura.
Jamie Ventura. We're going to leave you. And until next time.
See ya.